tonight's program. I finally get around to playing Greendragoon's mission.
I remember back during the first episode, I was trying to secretly get you to play it.
Yeah. And it worked. I played. We take a look at various writing tropes.
A trope is kind of a writing trap that tends to form where everyone does it this way.
And Hippiejohn professes his love for multi-select.
I don't think I could have been a Foundry author without multi-select, honestly.
Join us on the Foundry Roundtable. Hello and welcome to Episode 9 of the Foundry Roundtable, the show dedicated to covering the Foundry for Star Trek Online. I'm your tame Foundry author, Drogan1701. With me is the patron saint of tabletop roleplayers everywhere, Hippiejohn.
Hey, you actually know that about me. That's pretty cool.
I do pay attention on occasion. And we also have with us the god of wine, harvest, and the land of the dead, Markhawkman.
Hey.
That's not true at all.
Yeah, that one's...
And for something else not true, we also have with us the last remaining Budweiser frog, Greendragoon.
I deny whatever you just said.
And our guest tonight is Skydawn, who also goes by Skydawn Knight on the forums. He is the author of the Dark Alliance series. So welcome, Skydawn.
Hello, and thank you.
And I thought we'd start tonight with just a quick revisit to something that we talked about previously, which is tips for writing. Because I saw a tweet from William Shatner earlier today, which I thought was really good. Someone asked him for advice for beginning-level writers, and he responded by saying, learn your style by writing to entertain yourself and not the masses. And I thought that was good advice because it goes along with something that I heard from Nicholas Meyer, who, of course, is the director of Wrath of Khan Undiscovered Country. He said something to the effect of, I make the movies that I would want to watch. So my advice to Foundry authors going through these guys is make missions that you would want to play, and I think the audience will find you.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because there was I saw another thread on the forums this week of another player asking, how do you get plays? And my answer is, if you're going into the Foundry to get plays, you're doing it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Make a good product. Make sure people know about your product, and people will come play it. And interestingly, this is one of the authors, is DJF021, who I reviewed his mission and loved it. That was a great mission. And now he has revised it, I think, and I plan to play it again, actually, and maybe talk about it next podcast.
Cool.
Yeah. So why don't we go right into what we've been working on, and let's start with our guest. Skydawn, have you been working in the Foundry lately?
I actually have, just like our very recent discussion. I've been doing it in very, very small bits as I've been running into some issues that I need to work through. I'm working on the third part of Dark Alliance, and one of the things I've been trying to get done perfectly is the solo spawn.
Oh,
that's a tough one. What technique are you trying to do?
There are a couple of things. There's one, like, for example, in Kirkpack's Relics mission. I think he mentioned that was kind of a fluke, and what it is there's actually certain objects where there's no collision on top. So I was trying to get a room to pop up and just kind of having the away team fall through at the beginning of the map, so that you start out solo, or have it done in reverse, where you just fall through into the beginning of the map. The other possibility was to actually just have you kind of spawn, in the middle of something in midair, and just kind of have the room trigger around you during the story.
Well, along those lines, though, it's that reached location triggers work regardless of how you get to them. So if you spawn 20 feet up in the air and the reach location trigger is directly beneath you, as soon as you hit the ground, you'll trigger it. You probably could use this combined with that trick that who was that? Pendra came up with for teleporting the player, because that trick works with the most recently activated spawn point. So if you trigger a spawn point that's close to where you originally spawned but not at the same spot, and use that, you might be able to force the player to respawn before the map actually loads. And when they respawn, their bridge officers will be stuck somewhere else on the map.
For people who don't know, this technique that he's talking about is where you put the player in a room and you spawn a whole bunch of walls right on top of them. And I mean like a whole bunch of walls, which will essentially force a respawn, but it will only respawn the player and not their bridge officers. And it will do it at the closest respawn point. You don't even have to get, activate it where it tells you you've discovered a new respawn point. It just takes you to whatever the closest one is.
Okay. I'll give it a try.
It's weird, and you have to make sure that the player is standing in exactly the right spot. It's tough, but it can work.
I also wanted to try and come up with, a way to do it where it isn't going to be fixed by a bug fix or...
That's another challenge.
That's a big challenge.
Yeah, I don't think we can do that yet.
It'd be nice if someday Cryptic allows us to just have a little checkpoint that says, player only, and then another one that says player plus one away team member.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
I mean, it's obvious that in-house they have the tech to do that, because they do it in many different locations in the game.
Yeah, I've seen that several times.
But it's like anything, it takes somebody programmer time to put it in there.
Right. I figured out. I did figure out a way to. Well, that's in Darklands 2, actually. I figured out a way to get rid of the away team during the mission. That's not hard anymore. Even if a bug fix happens, it'll still happen. It's just having it happening at the beginning of the map. That's the tough part.
Yeah, so that the player appears to beam down alone. And I think Relics was a special case because there's several different things going on there, I think, with spawning and despawning floors and some of the things that you mentioned. And I don't think Kirkvat has ever been able to replicate it. All right. Mark, what have you been working on?
In the Foundry, well, I tinkered with the Tribble Foundry a little bit this week. Found a major bug that I reported to Cryptic Frost, and he said they're going to look into that and hopefully get it patched before it goes live. In case you're wondering about what this bug was, it was something that was preventing you from being able to use any custom costumes. Yeah, for some reason it just wasn't giving me the option to use custom costumes at all. Don't know why. Anyway, so
That's crazy.
Yeah. Aside from that, I've not really been doing all that much. I did, however, have something interesting happen to me the first time I logged into my Tribble Foundry character. She got dumped into the new KDF tutorial, which appears to be mostly complete.
Really?
Yeah.
Wonder if that's super secret, or should you talk about it, or?
Well, I don't have an EA, so hey, whatever.
Yeah. So tell us about it. We got the scoop.
What it is you are a junior officer on a small Klingon vessel, and your ship is going to a location for a prisoner exchange. However, when you get to the location, you suddenly get ambushed by a Federation ship. And you find out that your captain is secretly a Federation agent, and he's basically, decided to turn you over to the Feds. So your job is to take him out and commandeer the vessel and fly your ship back to the Empire like a good Klingon. So that's the basic gist. I mean, there's several maps you go through, and you have all the same sort of stuff that you have for the Federation tutorial.
Like learning how bridge officers work and that kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly.
Right on.
There's certain things you have to have in a tutorial, no matter what race it is. Yeah.
Well, honestly, up until now, the way Klingons have been done, you didn't need necessarily to have that information in the tutorial. I mean, I guess, real early on, you guys could play them at low levels, but for a really long time now, you start a Klingon after you've learned how to play the game. You know, you had to be level 25 as a Federation officer. You already knew all of the, you know, the little basic things you needed to know to play. You just needed to know where they were on the Klingon side maps. That's all. So, but now if people are going to be coming in potentially at level 1 first character Klingon.
Yeah, I'll have to say that this tutorial sounds a lot more fun than the Federation one now.
It does. It does.
I still keep hoping they'll use my idea for the Fed tutorial.
So do I. So do I, Aaron.
Well, one thing I noticed when I was doing it is that I got the same Gorn Bridge Officer from doing that tutorial that I did for the old KDF not tutorial mission. Because I mean, it used to be when you started a new KDF character, even though you were starting at like level 8, you'd have this mission to go pick up your initial complement of bridge officers, which, unlike the Federation, you would get like 2 or 3 bridge officers. One of them is a Gorn, and I got the exact same Gorn from this. Well, you may have noticed on Federation ships, you'll often see them have this Andorian tactical officer.
That's kind of scripted in now. I don't think you get a choice.
Yeah, you don't choose anymore.
Well, if you do the tutorial, you automatically get the Andorian. If you choose not to do the tutorial, you can choose one of the other 2.
That's what I'm getting at, though, is that the new KDF tutorial does the exact same thing by giving you a Gorn tactical officer.
I have no problem with that. I have no problem with that whatsoever, actually.
I was mentioning it because I found it amusing because they give you the same Gorn that you would get if you were playing KDF in Season 3. Because
honestly, with everything that they're doing, giving me a bridge officer that's the exact, that's already coded, that was obviously, probably seemingly a working bridge officer with everything else that they're working on, that doesn't seem like that big of a
I don't think it's a bad thing.
Concern.
I'm just saying that it's there.
Right.
Honestly, I don't know why they would change it.
I don't
it's essentially just putting it back to where it was.
Right.
And adding a new tutorial. Awesome. Greendragoon, what have you been working on?
A lot of little things. I finally had a free weekend. Worked a little bit on my mission, trying to slowly get Part 2 moved forward. Did a bunch of testing for the new Foundry assets that are incoming. Did a few tests for with the interior backgrounds, as well as did a few test scenarios with building backgrounds.
So are you still working on your catalog of interior backgrounds?
Slowly but surely. I'm thinking I might need to account for a few variables I hadn't considered when I first, just because as I go through, I'm discovering that the lighting can vary widely. I mean, for instance, there are some that have highlights even in shadow, while some don't.
Interesting.
You would not believe some of the fog effects that are on these. Oftentimes, apparently, the fog will not be consistent. It'll be like a certain color above the character, or above 0, and then it'll change as it gets to character 0, and then it'll go to a completely different color below character.
Okay. Have you ever jumped into the red water on the Gates of Grethor map?
I haven't gotten that far on my KDF character.
No. You can't jump into the red water in the actual Gates of Grethor mission because it's one of those things where it's scripted where if you fall in the red water, you die, if I remember right.
But you can in the Foundry version.
Yes. If you jump in the Foundry version,
you take a nice bath in red water.
If you angle the camera so that the point of view of the camera is looking up towards the surface of the water, it looks perfectly fine the same way, any other water would anywhere else. If you angle the camera so that it's almost exactly at the surface of the water, all of a sudden the water turns this angry orange color. Then, if you have the camera looking down towards the surface of the water, it looks red, like it, you would expect it to.
It's really just one of those things that goes to show you how you know, if you're a game designer and you know somebody is only going to be on one side of thing, you only model that side.
Mm-hmm.
You don't care what happens on the other side. Except now that we can get around to these other sides of things that we're not supposed to.
Yeah. It is kind of interesting that on that map, you can actually walk on the ground, I guess you could call it, underneath the water. I mean, it's actually like the San Francisco Bay section of the Starfleet Academy map. Granted, you can't walk. You can't get to that anymore. They fixed that glitch, but it used to be that there was a glitch that would let you walk out into the middle of San Francisco Bay.
I suspect San Francisco isn't as far as it looks.
Of course not.
You couldn't get out to San Francisco itself, but you could get out to this little island, and then you could get up on the bridge, part of the bridge.
Actually, if you get out close to the other end of the bridge, you'll notice that as a sort of a perspective illusion, they made it so that the bridge actually curves towards the ground, and when you walk out to the other end of the bridge, it looks really, really weird.
Yeah, it's a forced perspective.
Yeah.
You could really use that free cam command to explore this by just putting the one of the social maps into your mission, and then when you're testing it, free cam it. So
there's always demo record too.
Yeah,
but
it's true.
We hate demo record; it doesn't work properly.
Everybody says.
Dragoon, tell us about the new Foundry assets.
Sorry, I had to cough there a sec. Basically, it's mostly small things, but it's a lot of very interesting small things. First and foremost, one of the things I'm really excited about is all of those little gold starship models that we have in our bridges and we see on people's desks, we now are getting them. And pretty much all of them, as far as I could tell.
We're getting them, the individual ones, right?
Yeah, they're all individual.
That's what I really like about it, is that they're going to be the individual ones and not a big shelf of them. So.
And then just to sweeten the deal, there's actually a separate asset that is a gold stand for the ships. So you can have it sitting on a stand that would sit on like a desk or something.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
We are getting like latinum up to wazoo. I mean, every single denomination of latinum is now coming in. So you got slips, strips, bars, enormous, like big palletfuls of bars of gold pressed latinum.
Question about that.
Shoot.
Are they the? Because I haven't been on Tribble yet to have a look at these things. I don't want to download the giant patch. I would need to at this point. Or Redshirt. It's on Redshirt now. Okay.
Yeah.
The latinum that we're getting, is it the trophies that we used to be able to put on that you can earn by gambling?
The floating ones?
Well, if you play enough Dabo and you win ridiculous amounts of gold pressed latinum, you earn trophies that you can put on the trophy spots on your ship, like where the floor trophy goes in the lounge or the wall trophies go. You earn latinum trophies if you play Dabo enough and earn enough latinum.
I don't know, because I never got far enough to get more than just the couple of floating bars. But they are in a perfect shape to be used for whatever latinum you need. Plus,
very cool.
We also apparently have a latinum-plated table.
Now, see, now's the time I wish I could. Go ahead, Mark.
Oh, I just remember, I read through that list of stuff. I remember, there was a pool table in there, some weird thing that it's a crate with a giant gold nugget in it.
It's like a massive hunk of rock, like the size of a asteroid, that has like little veins of gold running through it, and then there's this wooden scaffolding around it.
Wow, space or ground?
The ground. I mean, as far as I can tell.
Interesting.
So it kind of looks like somebody found this giant rock with gold ore in it, and they're set up to mine it or something.
Yeah, that could be useful. Cool. I got to tell you though, this is one of those times when I wish I could go back and edit my Spotlight mission, because
could you use it's all Ferengi?
Yeah, a sequence of it is you stealing money from a Ferengi, and so it'd be great if there were piles of money behind him when you first confront him.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Well, maybe you'll get lucky. The Foundry will break, and all the Spotlight missions will have to be
re-edited. I can just add that. That'd be awesome. So, fingers crossed for Foundry breaking.
I want to slap you.
Well, we all know that in May there's going to be a huge downtime. Hope it's not too huge. We hope there's not a problem and that it's not too huge, but there is going to be some downtime, I guarantee you. We all just got to, close your eyes, think England, and it'll be over.
Since I've joined the game, every single season has brought downtime to the Foundry. So.
Oh, yeah, it's part of the standard procedure
since
now.
the Foundry launched.
Yeah.
I remember the Season 4 outage. That one sucked.
It was a time for the Foundry authors.
I was not playing then.
So the Season 4 outage took 2 months.
I've never been through any of these Foundry downtimes. Are they all invariably long, short?
Usually a couple weeks.
Usually 2, 3. I think the last one was 2 or 3. Or it was down for a week, and then they discovered a problem when they brought it back up, and it was down for another week.
Yeah.
Usually they'll roll it out back in phases, so they'll bring everything down, can't play, can't edit, and then they'll bring back just playing with reviews disabled. And so that's where all the authors can go in, test their missions, find out if there are any problems, in which case we're supposed to report back, let them know, hey, such and such things are breaking. And then, assuming that hasn't gone horribly wrong, then they'll let the authors in to edit, in which case they can fix any glitches that might not specifically be related to Foundry, like things have shifted or something like that. And then the final step is usually to bring reviewing back online.
Yep. Which, we're getting better at it.
Yeah. But, I mean, this whole process was developed because of Season 4.
Yes.
Because
that was
they brought the Foundry back
time.
with everything. Everyone found out it had been horribly messed up, like entire dialogue, all the dialogue in a mission had vanished and stuff like that. The Foundry authors panicked and started pulling their missions, which apparently made the problem worse. Then Cryptic's freaking out because the problem is getting worse. And, of course, the Foundry authors are panicking because they're all getting 1 stars. And so this all ends with a huge amount of downtime while they try to fix this and a rollback. They had to roll back to basically a save state.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, all of these safeguards are to prevent that.
Yeah.
By the way, they just posted the patch notes as we're recording this, and so we are, on April 4th, we are getting these new Foundry assets added to Holodeck.
Well, I figured as much because that's what registered for to test the next patch coming live.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Also, we
yeah. So, Hippie, what are you working on?
Right now, as we're talking, I'm working on making a round room that's driving me insane. It's great, though. I bet for as much of a tedious thing as what I'm doing has become, it's every time I boot up the map and look at it, I smile right now because it really is starting to look like a big round ceremonial room. I'm using the more kind of sandstone-looking building block platforms and walls and such to make this. So it's meant to be for a primitive culture. I've gone back. For whatever reason this week, and in fact, I think I know what it is. Was it Hulu that allowed that opened up all of the Star Trek series for like 5 days? You could just watch every episode of every series that you wanted. I kind of went back and rewatched a ton of original series episodes. When I did that, I kind of got re-inspired with the mission that I made for Kirkvat's contest long ago, the sequel to Alon of Troyes. And I'm at this point building a ceremonial chamber on the planet of Elos, and I just need it to be a big round room, and it's tedious, but it's kind of fun in a weird way. 10-foot walls again and again. So that's what I'm working on right now.
Can you make one round and then build, or just copy-paste your way up?
I don't think so, because the way I'm building it, I don't think so. What I'm doing is I'm setting up a wall piece to sit on the side of the room, to sit as the wall where I need it to be. And I need this wall to be, believe it or not, 3 levels high. And that's because the platform is kind of floating, so I'm needing to hide ground. It's just a weird thing so what I'm doing is I'm setting the one piece where I need it, and it's the X, Y, and Z coordinates. The Z coordinate doesn't change when I use the button inside of the editor to just copy the asset. So with that Z coordinate not changing, all I have to do is change the height and then copy and paste the X coordinate, and I'm able to build these 3 layers of wall. It's actually working out to be pretty quickly. In the time since we've been online talking, I've gotten more than a quarter, almost a half of this thing done. So it just kind of, while we've been talking, I figured out the easy way to place the walls.
Yeah, the key is definitely.
Now I can tell you one thing, though. I mean, it's probably too late for you to actually utilize it this time.
Mm-hmm.
But if you build, if you need multiple layers of some things that are essentially in the same coordinates, just one on top of the other, vertically, you can, build one level, multi-select it,
multi-select it,
paste,
and copy it down,
and then it will give you a field where you can adjust the height of it,
right?
And it will adjust all of their heights.
Right on.
Yeah.
Well, what I'm thinking about doing, and what I'm almost to right now, I think maybe 1 or 2 more sections. I've been thinking about building a quarter of the room, and then multi-selecting the entire wall bit, and trying to use that to put around the outside, since round is round. So.
The other thing is, when you do multi-select, if you build one side and then you multi-select the entire thing, what I used to do, as Drogan mentioned, is clone the whole thing. You change the height of the group, and before you duplicate it, you memorize the X coordinate of what you had selected, and you just type in that same X coordinate, and the entire group will move right back to where you copied it from.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yay.
Multi-select can be a very useful.
Trying to figure the thing that I'm trying to figure out now is how to spin an entire group of things that I have.
It'll spin around any of the rotational points.
Oh, right on.
Yeah. You just use one of your objects and hit, click and drag from its rotation point, and it will all rotate around that object.
Very cool.
As an anchor point.
Hey, for other people like me who didn't know that, you learned something new.
You young whippersnappers, I remember when we didn't have this fancy multi-select.
Really? There was a time that you guys didn't have multi-select?
Oh, yeah.
Actually, it wasn't that long ago.
That's a pretty recent feature.
That makes me want. I don't think I could have been a Foundry author without multi-select, honestly. I think I would have. I think I would have cried and said, I wish I could do this, and then gone and played the game some more.
Of course, there was also a time when we didn't have triggers at all, or dialogue trees.
Oh,
wow.
All of your dialogue trees had to be in a straight line.
Wow.
You couldn't do anything else.
Well, one of the features of the Season 3 Foundry that is no longer a part of the Foundry was that all enemies added to any map had to be part of a kill objective.
Oh.
I don't remember.
It sounds like, from the beginning they've come a long way then.
Yeah, I mean, everybody likes to complain about the beta status of the Foundry, but it has grown so much.
Oh, it has, absolutely. Well, I'll tell you, I have actually not been working in the Foundry this week. I've been continuing on with my little Romulan lore project, of course, playing every Romulan-related mission in the game and doing little plot summaries, which is going to be useful because, of course, as we now know since the last podcast, the plot of the Romulan faction will be happening concurrently with what you played in the Federation faction, if you plot it out on a timeline. because when you get to around level 40, I think you're going to start into the featured episodes, and so that's
you start with Cloaked Intentions on the Romulan side.
Because they're rewriting that a little bit so you can play it from the Romulan side.
Yeah.
So, and it's quite a lot of interesting plot developments in there, and some very surprising things, some scandalous things, and it's a lot of fun. So, check it out on the forums.
Well, one thing that you mentioned there that caught my attention was I remember reading in a thread on the forum a while back about how someone was, I'm not sure exactly what they were doing, but they somehow discovered that the devs had added in a bit of code to the game somewhere that would let them, the devs that is, choose dialogue options based on a player's...
Yeah, Kestrel was talking about that.
The obvious, this isn't one of those things that where you look at it and you're like, okay, I know what that's for, but thinking about the featured episodes, though, those are written so that all factions can play them. I mean, several of them that we have already actually do work considerably differently based on whether you're playing them as a Federation player or a Klingon. I mean, like one is the first part of the Dominion featured episode series. You have those duty officer missions that you complete, but you talk to a different contact and do different missions depending on whether you're a Federation player or a KDF player.
I think that one was built with that in mind, because I think those early featured episodes weren't built to be accessible by the KDF at first. They were refitted.
See, I think what you've just done is highlight why I don't think that Cryptic is at all successful in making the content something that's appealing to both factions. It's pretty much the exact same duty officer. It really is just a cut and paste with different words, with different,
What I'm getting at here, though, is that this new code bit that they added in lets them program in 3 different dialogue trees that will show up in the
Federation, Romulan, Klingon.
Yeah, so it depending on what race you're playing at, the mission will play different, or at least the dialogue options in the mission will play differently.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the way the game is built, it can't really be too different if it's the same mission.
Right.
And they probably don't want to go through all the effort to build 3 completely different versions with completely different objectives. All
Not to mention it makes it that much harder to maintain.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one thing I'm hoping is that we'll get the ability to use that, because I'm 99% sure that when the Romulans get released, with the way they've been advertised to work with cross-faction teaming, that you will end up having Romulan Star Empire or Romulan Republic people playing missions that were written for either the Feds or the KDF, and it would be nice if the players could utilize that sort of functionality.
Yeah, I'm really hoping that you're wrong about that.
Well, they actually explained this, or Dan, I thought, did, that basically if you team up with a Romulan Republic and they go play one of their exclusive missions, you can tag along with them.
Yeah.
But
that's what Dan seemed
Romulan
to indicate,
Republic
I thought.
does not have access to, say, Fed exclusive missions,
or
vice versa.
But what I was getting at, though, is that they can't play the mission on their own, but while they're going through the mission with you, they'll still see all the dialogue stuff.
I would imagine they just get the same dialogue as the Fed.
I would hope.
Maybe.
Honestly.
It's one of those that you'll have to see in practice and see if it does.
Because, I cannot see Cryptic going through all the effort to rewrite all the exclusive content for each faction.
Well, I wouldn't imagine that they would do all of it. I'm just saying that I see why they would want to have that functionality to revamp the featured episode missions to be able to utilize that.
Well, I would want to have it in place from the, I can see what you're getting at. I really hope you're wrong.
Well, also,
I hope you're wrong as far as the Foundry goes.
I would like to like it if they did put that into the Foundry because, well, I mean, it's one of those things that we don't need it, but it would be a cool toy to have to play with.
I think it's generally better practice, though, to create a copy of the mission and then revamp it for the other factions.
Sure,
it's not like Foundry slots are
significant
that expensive.
rewrites to make it more focused to that faction, more tailored, you know?
Yeah. I think as Foundry authors, we can do that even better than the Cryptic missions can, personally.
Of course, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just agreeing with Hippie, sorry.
I was going to say, of course, what Kestrel could have meant was that they're getting the ability to detect, say, for instance, if you're playing a Vulcan or a Andorian. And
that was my reading of what she said, was that they're going to know, like, I mean, your race is something that is kind of attached to your character, and I got the impression that that she was getting the ability with dialogue to say, hey, this person is a Vulcan, or this person is, and that she now can go in and write dialogue specific to that Orion character, or that, or that Vulcan, or that I don't know that we're going to get that in the Foundry, though. I hope.
That would be nice.
Yeah, it would be great, actually.
And that's something that we've kind of talked about off and on since the Foundry first got started, is, a way to be able to tailor dialogue to that, so the game will know if you have a Vulcan bridge officer, it will talk like a
Vulcan,
a Vulcan instead of like everybody else.
Well, but if that's the case, then, I mean, why stop there? If you can do that, then you can specify whether or not somebody's male or female. That would make things...
That would be good, too.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to mission reviews. And why don't I go first? Because I actually played Greendragoon's mission this week.
Yay! I remember back during the first episode, I was trying to secretly get you to play it.
Yeah. And it worked. I played it, and it's a fantastic mission. This, of course, is in the Shadow of Midas, Part 1. Did I get that right?
You did.
Excellent. Which, of course, refers to the Midas Array, which is a part of the later Voyager seasons. It's something that was built as a very, very, very long-range communications array by Earth to contact Voyager.
It was basically a vehicle for Reginald Barclay.
Yes. Which I thought was awesome because he's one of my favorite characters ever. In any case, the mission takes you to... It essentially opens up a wormhole. You go through it, and you encounter this primitive civilization. You have to essentially... You're tasked with investigating what happened to a couple of starships that disappeared through this wormhole, and you have a time limit to get back to where you were, and you discover all kinds of plot twists along the way. It's great. It's a complex plot without being too complicated, and the map design is great. It's absolutely great. We were just talking about your crashed starship, which you said was your first custom build ever. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, that kind of started the inspiration for the mission.
Mm-hmm. Because you had to have been watching Generations, right?
It's one of those scenes that's always in my mind, and when I saw that wall, I immediately thought, oh, lip of the Enterprise D.
Yeah. Because that's what it really reminded me of. And as I told you before the podcast, I definitely am going to build one of my own because that's just really cool. And I liked how you were able to go up inside of it a little bit, and then it transitioned into the interior map, which was a cryptic interior map, just all, customized all the heck in really great ways, I thought. So, I mean, it's amazing for a first mission and an only mission. So I think it's a fantastic mission. Everybody play it and get Part 2 done, now.
Trying. A lot of the maps are built, and I have not gone through started the dialogue process yet. I've got a few pieces here and there of dialogue I know kind of what wants to follow. The plot is mostly plotted out. I mean, I knew mostly what was going to happen in Part 2 and 3 before I released Part 1. but it's been a lot of fleshing out of Part 2.
Well, it's a good place to be at.
Yeah.
At least have an idea of what's going to happen over the rest of the series.
Well, I kind of have to be careful that I can get you out of the situation I put you in.
It is a hell of a cliffhanger.
It's a great cliffhanger. I'm glad that we now have Drogon on the greedragoon make the next part.
Yeah.
Brigade.
So every podcast from now on, we're going to start off with, is it out yet?
Did you make part 2 yet?
Made part 2 yet?
Well,
Yeah.
one thing that I was just thinking of is that it was a rather old Foundry mission where the purpose of a mission was to repair the Argus array.
That was Duke of Rocks.
Yeah, that's one of Duke's.
Yeah. I thought of this because I was trying to remember which mission you were talking about for a little while there.
Yeah, no, it's and different communications arrays, or actually Argus is a sensor array, but that's...
Yeah, Argus is a deep space sensor array.
Which showed up in...
I think in TNG it was described as a subspace telescope.
Yeah, that would be it.
Yeah, something like that. John, what have you been playing?
I played a few Foundry missions this week. Not a lot jumped out at me. A couple that I thought had a cool title turned out to be nothing more than kill these things until I finish spawning these things for you to kill for 15 minutes of time. So some things with cool sometimes something might even have a cool name and still be nothing more than just a kill lots of stuff mission. But I play a lot of Klingon stuff. I think that's become clear to me, at least. I played CaptPFDennis's Klingon Spotlight this week that I hadn't played yet, and it's good. It's certainly worth being a Spotlight mission. It's really well done. It's everything that he told me after I played it that it was one of his very first, and it has some of the things that I've come to expect when I play a mission by Paul, and that is, there's great map tricks. There's just good use of things that the Foundry is capable of doing. It was the first time, though, when we had Paul on the show, we talked about how you have that choice of Captain's dialogue, and that this is the story you're telling. And I have two KDF side characters. I have one who's very rah, the Empire, it's great, be a great Klingon warrior, die with a blade in your hand, etc. And the other is a sneaky Lethian. So at the end of this particular mission, Paul just makes a storytelling choice. It's one of those that has an impact on the way that your character would probably view it, I would imagine. And it was, for the first time playing one of Paul's missions, a choice that my character just absolutely would never have made. And it was very, very, very well done. It's everything I've come to expect when I play one of P.F. Dennis's missions, and that's just good stuff in general. It's just we talked about those storytelling decisions and making and I love that Paul sticks by this is the story I'm telling. If it works for your character, great. If it doesn't, that's great too. It's a decision. It's it's not my way of doing it, but I like it. So it was definitely a fun mission, definitely worth playing. So that's what I've got to say about it. That's the one mission that really jumps to mind that I played this week that I actually had fun playing, regardless of my character wouldn't have made the decision at the end, kind of thing. Mm. All the rest ended up being things that kind of had a good name and ended up being garbage. So. Mm. Hey, I'm not going to name those and say, hey, this was garbage, but, to me it was something, and it's not necessarily garbage. It's what it is it's, to me, I'd never touch it again. It's not something that I have any interest in playing. Right, it's not my style play. There are people who will enjoy it, so, they're out there. If all you want to do is shoot things and kill things and have no story whatsoever. Some of them even have pretty cool names.
Well, I remember a while back, back before people started, going crazy over the Foundry rewards, back when there really were no rewards, there actually were quite a lot of missions where you would go in, kill things, and that would be it. This was back before they set it up so that you would actually get decent gear from killing random enemies. This was before they even had, anything more than a single purple quality item as a reward for playing 3 Foundry missions.
Okay.
Well, it's the simplest form of MMO quest there ever is go to kill 10 rats. So it's not surprising that people would make those.
Well, here's the thing, though, is that these Foundry missions were actually, in many cases, accolade grinders. What
there's still some of those around.
Is, you open the mission, you kill 100 Romulans, and you do this enough times, and then you get a damage bonus whenever you're fighting Romulans.
Sometimes it's just for the title.
You have a title that you'd love to have.
Not love to have. I found a mirror universe. Just shoot as many ground soldiers as you can, and finally got myself that evil twin title. And I was going after it because role playing more than anything. I wanted to be able to have my mirror universe costume on my character and have it make sense. So.
Ooh, evil hippie.
Yeah, evil twin. It's a great title to put into the game, in my opinion.
I actually have 2 characters that use the Terran Empire logo on their uniform.
Yeah, I basically took because that's the character that has the Odyssey uniform. I've gone ahead and made just kind of an opposite version and, made it look like the Odyssey uniform. So.
One of mine is a Vorta from the Mirror Universe, which they never did really get into what the status of the Vorta and the Dominion is in the Mirror Universe. So,
So they hadn't discovered the wormhole, so.
In terms of storytelling, the Mirror Universe is really one of the richest things that Star Trek ever came up with. It really is. It's some brilliant, brilliant stuff.
It's kind of like the way that the DC Comics created the antimatter universe.
The antimatter universe of Bard,
Where you go to the that universe's version of Earth, and you find that the Justice League are actually a bunch of, cruel tyrants who rule the world with an iron fist.
It's a really great storytelling technique. It's a way to explore a mirror universe or a dark reflection of your hero that the people have grown used to, only having heroic traits, suddenly really makes how to explain it exactly. It gives you a chance to explore a different side of the character that you are likely not really ever going to see otherwise. If you're dealing with it.
Nemesis would have been so much better as a Mirror Universe movie?
Probably, yeah. It's very possible.
In a certain way, it kind of was.
Yeah.
Because Picard had to confront the person that he could have become if his life had gone differently than it actually did.
Well,
sorry.
He's one of those people who's better in other things, right?
Yeah, very much.
It's like that kid who played Darth Vader. I've seen him in other movies. He's great in other movies.
He's just fine. Jake Lloyd, just fine in other films.
Sure.
It does
You're not kidding.
Bothered me because we've seen a young Picard before, and he was not bald.
He was not bald. You're bothered by the same things I was bothered by, Dragoon.
Shinzon was bald, but it wasn't necessarily a genetic condition because he had hung out with Remans all the time. It's entirely possible.
No, they showed a picture of Picard supposedly as a cadet, and it was him bald.
It's just an out-of-focus picture of, what's his name?
Tom Hardy.
Yeah.
Was that? No, it wasn't Tom Hardy.
Yeah, it was Tom Hardy.
It was Tom Hardy that played Shinzon? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, back to mission reviews. We've kind of got away from it a little bit. Markhawkman, what have you been playing?
I honestly haven't had a lot of time to play Foundry missions. I've been spending more time poking around on Tribble, looking at various things, and I've been spending more time on Tribble, trying to, find little tiny bits and details of what we're going to have in the May expansion. I did, however, manage to find something that might be the name of the planet that the players start on in the Romulan tutorial.
Cool. What do you think the name of the planet is?
Spill the beans, man.
If you look in the current version of the Tribble character creator, you'll see several basic uniform options that you can choose to use. One of them is Rom Rustic. The skin of the uniform mentions what's apparently the name. Well, it says your new homeworld, Virinat. Virinat.
No.
Well,
Cool.
as we found out from the dev blog today, it's supposed to be some sort of colony world that's kind of forgotten by either Titan's movement or the Romulan Empire.
Well, what I got from today's dev blog is that this colony world was founded by people who wanted to be forgotten.
Yeah, possibly.
You guys are going to make me talk about this before the show is over.
Well, moving on then. Greendragoon, what have you been playing?
I have actually been playing quite a few things. I'm kind of making up for last week. I got two things I want to talk about. First off, I finally finished Captain Revo's Power Wraith series. That would be a
good series.
It is. I wasn't sure about it at first. I mean, obviously, Worst of All Worlds was made way back at the beginning of the Foundry.
Mm-hmm.
And for a while, it was not clear that any of these missions had to do anything with each other. And I almost kind of suspect that they didn't at the start, and he actually decided to combine them later on. But right around episode 4, they both finally come crashing together, and that's when it gets really good. And I got to say, the ending of episode 4 is a cliffhanger that I would be proud of. I mean, not to give too much away, but yeah, you go into a very familiar place, and there is this pod wraith there, and this very familiar place is on fire everywhere. I mean, it's like a very glorious shot, and the mission ends that way.
Yep, that's a hell of a cliffhanger there.
Yeah. And I'm trying not to get away. My only complaint was episode 5, which takes place immediately after this, sends you across the galaxy, despite the fact that all of the primary threat is where you just were. So I thought that was a little odd.
Mm-hmm.
I think he did it to kind of fill out the story and to do some other things. But yeah, the fact that you run off to take care of this other threat is like, it's like, wait, you're here already. Why are you going over there? But, I mean, overall, it was just such a good mission series, and just had so many twists and turns, and despite the fact that, I mean, I would almost consider it canon breaking with the links it went to, a part of me was like screaming, like, I don't know that you can do this, and the other rest of me is like, I don't care.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can absolutely get away with canon breaking.
Yeah, he totally gets away. I mean, he doesn't. I mean, he brings things back and wraps everything up nicely, so you could say it happened, and they just fixed everything. But yeah, I mean, while you're playing, is like, how can all of this happen and everything else in the game still be?
How can you blow up 7,000 times and still be around?
Good point.
Because it's a game.
Because it's a game. Yeah.
Permadeath is no fun.
I agree.
I will say I would love to see him. I mean, especially since so much of this, mission was done well before a lot of the Foundry tricks we have now. I would love to see him go back and remaster the series.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, just go through into the earlier ones, kind of add in some elements from the later stuff, as well as, I mean, yeah, there's so many places in there where he kind of bends over a little bit to try to get around a Foundry limitation that used to exist and that no longer exists anymore.
Yeah, and you can see you can see that it. Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so there is very good. I recommend people go play it. The other mission I want to talk about is actually a mission that was recommended to me by AliMac. And as you can expect, if AliMac recommends a mission, it raises my eyebrow. The mission is called Operation Demon Flame by Eurrsk. I'll give you a spelling of that later, Dragon. And I'm not going to say the story is anything great or impressive. In fact, the entire mission is probably about a half hour long. But what I'm sure caught AliMac's eye, and definitely mine, is he has built this gorgeous Romulan colony. I mean, this thing is really impressive work. All of you people saying, oh, we don't have enough assets to make anything Romulan. Yes, you do, and this guy proves it. I mean, yeah, I mean, this is almost New Romulus gorgeous.
Is
it?
I'll just go see it for myself.
Yeah, here's a question: is it completely custom?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's built into this cove, and he's built up these cliff walls, and all around the this cove are these built up Romulan buildings, and it's all laid out, and it comes into this dock area, and he's got like this circular dock area with walkways leading off, and they've all been lined with I think he used colony lampposts that have those strings leaning between them to kind of, and then sunk them to kind of make railings.
Mm-hmm.
And so he does all of this gorgeous work. I mean, he's put in some plants to fill in everything. It's really nicely done. Story I wish was as good. Like I said, it's pretty short, and it does a couple of things that I'm going to say aren't consistent with established facts. First off, I mean, it starts out by you're called to this colony to investigate an attack by the Tal Shiar. The Tal Shiar are attacking. They're interrogating the inhabitants there, and you eventually find out they're trying to find this Iconian gateway that apparently was there, and then they try to open it, which apparently to bring their Iconian masters through, and this is where I started to have problems with it, because everywhere we've seen, Iconian gateways are outgoing, not ingoing.
Yeah, that's true.
Iconian gateways send you somewhere else, and usually there is no exit aperture. You don't need to open anything on the other side. You just appear there.
Yeah, it's kind of like a transporter, but it's a doorway instead.
Yeah, so that was the kind of the first big thing I had a problem with. Basically, the Iconians start sending through these drones, which are basically NPCs skinned as props. Which, I mean, and I think he used that probe prop, that white one.
There are actually a few Foundry assets in the preset costumes that do look like inanimate objects.
Yeah, those are the prop costumes. He uses one of them, and I thought it was okay. I mean, we don't really know that much about the Iconians to hazard a guess as to what kind of equipment they use. Then he kind of sends out these reprogrammed Borg, and it probably bugged me more because this is the second or third time I've seen hacked or reprogrammed Borg. And so I'm thinking it's
apparently really easy to hack and reprogram Borg.
Yeah. So, and other than these few Borg showing up, there's no reason for Borg to be in this mission, which kind of annoyed me. So, I mean, I thought it would have been kind of cool, and this is a suggestion if he happens to be listening, but I thought it would have been cool if they had done something with like having some of the dead Tal Shiar or something come back to life, like possessed or something. I mean, if you're going to go somewhere along those lines, that would have been really cool and stuck more with what's established in the scene already instead of introducing the Borg as a new element. Also, the probes were using Davidian powers, which kind of was a little weird.
Well, I actually have seen one very strange thing a person did on accident in a Foundry map that was incredibly creepy and very cool to see in action. But again, like I said, this was an accident. What it was is this person was attempting to create NPCs that would, lay on the ground dead, and you can walk past their lifeless corpses while you're looking for the people that killed them. Thing is, what he actually did was, instead of creating non-combat NPCs, he placed ground combat groups that he used as his corpses. Because there's an animation where there are several animations actually where you can have the person just lay there and not move or anything, and that's the sort of trick he was using to make them pretend to be corpses. It was really, really weird and creepy seeing the guys that are laying on the ground, apparently dead, just suddenly get up and shoot a bunch of enemies, and then just go back to laying on the ground dead.
Yeah, I can definitely see that being an interesting premise for a mission.
Well, what I was thinking of, though, is that you could, in theory at least, you could actually do that intentionally. Like, you walk into a room and you see what look like, dead guys, and all of a sudden they just suddenly get up and shoot you.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you scatter them in amongst non-combat contexts.
Yeah.
So you're walking through and you kind of get used to the dead bodies, but then some of them come back to life.
Yeah.
That should be a good Halloween mission.
There you go. Well, good. Skydawn, have you been playing any Foundry missions lately?
I actually have not. I've been trying to, usually at least once a week, because I like to keep my title as a reviewer, at least active as far as myself is concerned. I try to pick a random mission, new mission to play, but this week I haven't gotten the chance to do that. Of course, just like John, most of the new missions that I pick up, I'll try and pick up at least once a week, and I'll come across something that's, it sounds really cool, but it's really not. I won't name those either.
Yeah, unfortunately, those are very, very common.
But other than that, the last I am intending on playing probably tomorrow the Allegiance series. I played the first one months ago, and I know it's up to part 3 now, and I barely remember what happened, so I'm actually going to try and play it up.
It's Chico Chavez. He's one of that we have played, several of us.
Yeah. I've played the first one. I'm like you, Skydawn. I need the time to play the other two. Is what it comes down to, yeah.
Absolutely. So let's move right along to discussion topics, and I'm going to start because there's something going on that I feel very strongly about. Hippie, you don't have to comment if you don't want to, and that is, what is going to happen with Romulans and the Foundry. And I feel very strongly that the Romulan Foundry should be segregated from the other two, just like Federation and Klingon are now. There just needs to be that third option to make Foundry mission just exclusively for the Romulans. They need to have their own list, their own missions that are written specifically for them. And I don't know if that's a certainty that that's going to happen, because we haven't had that answer. And since the last podcast, of course, we found out that the Romulans are going to, at level 10, pick a side to ally with. And I think I think a lot of people are assuming that they're going to be joining and be absorbed by those factions, by KDF or Fed, and I don't think that's quite true. But I know it's going to affect fleets. You're going to be joining one fleet or the other from one side or the other. And you're going to be, like, I think PvP queues are going to be affected by this. But we don't know if the Foundry, I mean, we don't know that this is going to mean, whether or not this is going to mean that you play Foundry missions from Fed or Foundry missions from KDF list. And I think it would be a bad idea if they did it that way. Because it just doesn't make sense for Romulan players to be playing missions that were written for Federation. Because, you know, obviously there's thousands of those already. What makes sense is to be able to write missions for Romulans that only Romulans can play. So I mean, that's what I feel about it.
I'm hoping that the Foundry missions, the way they're separated by faction, will mirror the way the cryptic missions are separated by faction. Because currently, what we know of the cryptic missions, each faction will have their own storyline mission that they can play, and depending on whether or not a particular Romulan is allied with Feds or KDF, they may or may not be able to team with someone and play along with them. However, being allied with the Feds doesn't give you the ability to start the mission yourself. I'm hoping that the Foundry will mimic that.
If I may say, I think you're right, Drogon, first. Having Romulan exclusive message seems to be the way to go. Secondly, I think if Cryptic were to come out and say it, they would agree with you too. I think the ambiguity and the uncertainty comes from not whether or not it would work this way, is whether or not they're going to have time to do it before the launch of the expansion.
Yeah, I'm sure it's probably not as easy as I might think it is. Just,
well, no,
you know, it's not flipping a switch. It never is. But
we don't even have a reference for what it takes to
no.
add a faction, because, I mean, since the Foundry has launched, it's had the two factions.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, you know, it just needs to be in there exactly like those two factions are now, where it's part of that drop-down menu where you pick one. You pick one and it's only for that one. Because I think, you know, if you have to make a Romulan mission through the Federation or through the KDF, you're going to have to plaster it with notes that says, this is a Romulan mission. And some guy is going to come along and one-star you because he'll say, this doesn't make any sense for my Federation human.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I think it doesn't make sense, just because the writing is going to have to be very, very different. I mean, you wouldn't write a mission for a Klingon, or actually, because we do have Federation Klingon characters, don't we? So
yes.
That's a bad example, but you know, you wouldn't write a mission for a Romulan for the Federation. That just doesn't make sense. And I think if Cryptic is serious about wanting people to think that this is a real faction, and obviously we know from the forums that people have this concern that it's not a real faction, but if Cryptic is serious about convincing people that it is, they need to separate the Foundry.
Yeah, and like I said, I think it will happen. I think Cryptic is unsure if they will have time to do it in time for the release. Because everything I see says they are up to their ears trying to get this to happen.
And I've been asking.
Go ahead.
We don't have the answer.
See, I'm glad that this is the topic that we're talking about, because this, I agree with you. However, what you're saying about it there, Dragoon, highlights the way I feel about the expansion. If the Foundry and PvE games, STS and PvE, everything about the game needs to be considered before they say we're ready to make this faction. If they're not going to have, this ready to go in May, then they don't have the expansion ready to go in May. If not everything that's affected by it is ready to go. That's just kind of my opinion, on that.
We don't particularly know one way or the other if it's ready to go or not.
Right. We have no idea.
Because they haven't said. And there's lots that they haven't said yet.
That's the other.
And I'm agreeing, and I'm in complete agreement with you, Drogon, that it should be hooked up to have the ability to play or create Romulan-specific missions from the get-go.
Now, that said, I'm not going to, boycott the game if they don't do it that way. I am not that kind of player. I will be disappointed, and I'll probably say so, but I won't rage. I won't rage quit or anything like that. It's just, I hope this is the way they do it.
Well, just kind of hoping it happens, because it almost seems like the way that they were talking about it, that they're releasing the faction with their own, even though it follows the same path, their own kind of tailored featured episodes.
Yeah.
So that being the case, I'm hoping, and that's just a hope of mine, that can incorporate itself into the Foundry, since it might already be programmed that way. I'm kind of thinking that the reason why they did this whole thing where Romulan can join, or the entire split faction thing, is so that players that are already in the game, that have already been working on their fleets, and all this has been done, that they can write Romulan characters into the game without having to start from scratch.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
that's a good point. It's a really good point.
I think that's one of the reasons.
Mission creation.
No, I think you're absolutely right about that, and it's also to keep the PvP queues manageable. Because making a three-way, it's got to be tough to figure out the logistics of that as far as PvP queues go.
You'd think, right?
That's all I can say. Have any ideas about how that would actually work? I mean, is there?
Of course, just because something's complicated doesn't mean it's not worth doing, right?
No, but I mean, is there any examples of MMOs that do have a 3-faction PvP system?
Not that I know.
I've played games that had multi-faction PvP and area control effects, but they weren't MMOs.
It may be one of those cases that Cryptic just didn't know how to properly approach
it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know. I mean,
couldn't say about that.
Everyone likes to use that as an excuse to why the Romulans aren't a full faction, but it's easy. It's easy to complain. It's harder to come up with solutions.
Personally,
I like that. It is. It's easy to complain. It is harder to come up with solutions. That's very, very true.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, the one game that I've played extensively that had the territory control thing and 4 factions that were fighting over the map and doing all that, it was actually one of the Soul Calibur games. Each of the people who played on that particular game console would fight as a member of one of the 4 factions. And whichever team won the most, they would control the largest section of the territory map.
Okay.
I think this is just conjecture because I have not played this aspect of the game a lot. I think in Guild Wars 2 they call it world versus world, where essentially players from your server are fighting players from other servers, because that one has multiple shards. And I think you have at least 3 or more of these servers fighting it out on one map at any given time. So I think that's an example, and it's got to be hard to balance those things.
Yeah.
But I see why they did it that way, and that doesn't bother me, because first of all, because I'm not a PvPer. Second of all, because I'm not focused on the fleet aspect of the game at the moment. So, those things don't bother me. The lack of information on the Foundry bothers me.
Yeah.
But I mean,
I hope to have that question answered in the next few weeks, please.
Yeah. I mean, as much as it is an important issue to us, it is not as big as other things going on right now.
It's one of those things I remind myself that we are probably the smallest percentage of players in this game.
I don't know, we might be tied with the PvP community.
We might be, yeah. We might be tied with the PvP community. That's true, but we're a very small percentage of the of players in the game, and I totally understand that. Yeah,
we're fighters.
And it just comes to you have to fully understand that, I think, if you're going to be an author.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the key is not to let or base your ability to create missions on what Cryptic does or doesn't give you.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
work with it, and
work with what they do give you, and don't worry about what they're not going to give you, or what they may give you in the future. Is build for what you got right now.
Yeah, that was like what CaptPFDennis said, which was they probably don't give us any much because they keep being impressed by what we do with so little.
Yeah.
Well, we really screwed ourselves there, haven't we?
Yeah.
Well, wasn't that what Brandon said during the last challenge when we got all hot and bothered because they gave us a Tholian challenge without giving us Tholian mob contacts that we could talk to? And he said, well, I've always been impressed with what you guys can do with so little, so...
Yeah, it's our own damn
So that's it. For the next couple of weeks, we should just generate all, kill enemies around space dock missions.
Mm-hmm.
And
really crappy missions, and then try and convince them that we need better tools so we can stop making these
Yeah, but then I wouldn't want to play anymore.
Yeah.
That
would depress me, making missions that bad.
Yeah, I'd go cry into my cereal.
All right, who's got another topic for us?
I've got a topic if you guys are interested.
Shocking.
Something that has been occurring to me lately, and I mentioned one of them, is Foundry tropes. This is
tropes.
You might
we have
what
tropes.
A trope is.
A trope is kind of a writing trap that tends to form where everyone does it this way, or it shows up a lot.
Description, Dragoon, by the way. I like that. A writing trap. That is one of the
best.
I
mean,
it
some of
them you fall into.
Some of them are out of necessity.
Right. I've never heard it described that way.
But yeah, I mean, it's one of those. This is the greatest thing ever. It's so great. In fact, everyone is doing it. So I have a couple, and a couple of them I've taken because I found myself falling into these traps. Another one, the hacking the Borg, I consider now to be a trope. The biggest one, I think, is the infamous threat to the Federation.
Yep, you do see an infinite amount of missions that have some sort of giant, threat to the existence of the Federation, and you have to save the day. You're the only ship in the sector.
Yeah, and especially the new enemy threat to the Federation.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen this quite a few.
Yeah, one that I see a lot is the distress call, which of course it comes from a lot of these come from the shows.
Yeah.
It happened a lot in the shows. Is that you pick up a distress call, and that is the impetus for the mission. You were just happen to be passing by somewhere.
Another one, and this is another one I am totally guilty of, is the sending them across the galaxy / universe.
Yes, you are guilty of that one.
Yeah, trapping me there, and then not having the
I'm
rest
still
of
there, right? By the way, I'm broadcasting to you from some unknown region in the middle of between the Delta and Gamma quadrants.
Yeah, and unfortunately, Drogon and I ended up in different instances, so we can't even help each other out. You really have to get the next part of this done, Dragoon.
We can't transfer instances because they're full. So
you guys took the Sigma-Iconian Gateway, didn't you?
I agree. What is I'm certainly interested in talking about tropes because I love them.
Now, the thing is though that and if you've ever gone on the website tvtropes.org, which is a fantastic site and a huge time waster.
I know.
Giant time
went
waster.
there.
Spend hours and hours and hours on there.
Came up.
But they have a thing on there that says tropes are not negative. Is that these things are not necessarily bad.
Yeah,
I agree.
But they are common storytelling tools.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, some are established because, frankly, there's just no good way to write out of it, some, it's just knowing what they are. Being aware of them and not relying on a trope to be your sole source of coolness.
So I think a trope is different than a cliche, honestly. I think they have kind of similar background or similar source that they come from, but a trope is to me, even some of the things that you named in there they're familiar pieces of science fiction, and they're stories that in a genre that can be filled with stuff that is so, like science fiction is brilliant in its ability to go so far out there in the human imagination that having something familiar makes tropes like the distress signal that people respond to, or even them getting thrown halfway across the universe. I mean, that was a trope before, the 60s were over. I mean, people getting thrown halfway across the universe. That's some of the earliest sci-fi. That's, Flash Gordon got thrown halfway across the universe. Lost in Space, they got thrown halfway across the universe. Buck Rogers got frozen in time halfway across the temporal universe. So these are, to me, a trope is a familiar method of storytelling that helps make, that often can help make things that are unfamiliar easier to take. Cliches, on the other hand, are often just unwelcome. Things that just get used literally so much that they become cliched.
One thing I've thought about here is there's a difference between a stereotype and a pale stereotype, because a stereotype is, you have the weapons officer who isn't afraid of anything and will shoot anything that moves. Well, I mean, yes, you see that one show up a whole lot, but the stereotype originated because that makes sense for a person who carries around loaded weapons constantly. But see, pale stereotypes, though, are different from that in that in one way they function the same as a stereotype, but you don't have any sort of, I guess you could say, depth to the character. If all the character is a gun-crazy nut, then, well, that's a very shallow, boring character.
Yeah.
And that's all part of it, yeah.
I was just thinking about what he said, and I think this could count as a trope, but a necessary one. The idea that the technical officer is more aggressive and the science officer is more cerebral.
Mm-hmm. Does it need to be in Foundry storytelling? Maybe, because we don't know.
Sort of the simplest
because we don't know, that is the easiest go-to, and the easiest. It doesn't offend somebody to make their tactical officer be like, well, let's shoot them. He's the tactical officer, or to have the science officer try to come up with the, like you say, the cerebral answer to the question, because he's and are they necessary? Maybe.
Okay, well, I should say that I won't be offended if I see this one show up.
Yeah.
One of the ones that I have seen pop up a lot is, and I just completely blanked on it. It's the starting a mission with a completely unrelated event.
Okay.
And this is something that I initially complained about in a cryptic mission until I realized I had done it myself. At the very beginning of the Dominion featured series, you go to DS9 for a summit of, the KDF and the Cardassians and the Federation.
Everybody.
That event, because something else happens during the middle of that event is completely irrelevant to the rest of the plot and is never mentioned again.
Ever. It disappeared.
I would almost say that's a general writing trope.
Mm-hmm. It was just a reason to get you to DS9.
Yeah.
And I realized that I had done exactly the same thing.
It's hard. They're everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Here's the thing, though. How many times did that particular plot device get used in the various TV series?
Oh, lots.
Mm-hmm.
And not just Star Trek. I mean, that happens to everybody.
Yeah.
But and it's interesting because looking at this TV tropes website, which categorizes all of these tropes.
Oh, Drogon, you'll never come back.
I'm looking at the Star Trek one, and here's a great one: is the teleporter accident.
Oh yeah.
How many times in Star Trek have we seen some kind of accident with the transporter?
It's because the transporter is too powerful a device.
And it's
Really
an easy thing to set a plot around, is an accident with it.
Also, it's a very complicated piece of machinery that only a few people in universe understand properly. So, you can easily come up with all sorts of different ways that such a complex piece of equipment can go horribly wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so it's like Foundry.
And things going horribly wrong, great place to do a plot, right?
Yeah.
It's funny,
In the Next Generation, how many different transporter accident-related stories were there, and how many different ways did these stories actually get written?
I was just going to ask, did that morph when you got to the Next Generation a little bit, or did it just get the addition of suddenly the holodeck malfunctions too? How many times did that happen?
Holodeck malfunction is a great one.
It's funny, one of the things I had heard about when Gene Roddenberry was first pitching the series, apparently the producers or whatnot were concerned about having a transporter in the plot because they said, well, what's the conflict if they can just always beam up if there's any danger?
Of course, the solution to that is pretty much to, establish loose limits to when and where you can transport people.
And make it easy for the transport to be interfered with. So for some reason, everybody beamed down okay, but something on the planet is preventing them from beaming up.
Well, I mean, like in one episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, they beam down, and then they find out that there's these energy-absorbing crystals that cause the transporter beam to be deflected to some other location. And in one case, Commander Data, actually, he actually rematerialized standing on top of one of the energy-absorbing crystals. And they're like, wow, that was close. If our beaming coordinates hadn't been far enough away from these crystals, we would have been absorbed by them.
Here's another one that definitely relates to Star Trek Online and the Foundry. It's called Villain Decay, which is essentially the more you see your villain, the more you learn about them, the less villainy they become and the less scary they become.
That
has happened to the Borg.
I agree with that.
Borg are not scary since First Contact.
Yeah.
Well, the thing with that one, though, is that in part it's because of once you've beaten a villain a certain number of times, you have to either come up with new ways to make the villain challenging, or the people watching are like, okay, so why don't they just beat the guy the same way they did last time?
Mm-hmm.
That's a large part of where that comes from, is that once you've beaten a villain, they're never going to be as scary as they were the first time.
They can be.
But you have to work at
it. They really can be. You just need good writing. The Joker, Batman's arch nemesis, can be and has been scarier multiple times since the first time that he appeared. And the first time that he appeared, I mean, I'm not even, or even the retellings when a villain can remain scary as long as they don't become familiar. A villain can remain frightening if they don't become... The minute that villains become familiar to the heroes in a way that is accepted on both sides. So in the Batman-Joker dynamic, the Joker constantly, it seems that he's constantly trying to get Batman to accept him as, like, his one true other side kind of thing. And, like, he's trying there, but Batman will never accept that. So that dynamic can remain, he can remain the villain, and in fact, that's kind of creepy, that aspect of his character. Which is, you know...
That's a big part of the Dark Knight, the movie. Right.
Yep. And it allows, it allows for that character to remain frightening. As soon as Janeway and the Borg became familiar in a way that both were accepting of the arrangement, the Borg stopped being scary. As soon as Gul Dukat and Cisco became familiar in a way that they both were accepting of that arrangement, Gul Dukat became less frightening to me.
I don't know. I'd argue with Gul Dukat that he got creepier the more you got to know him.
Yeah, he may have been somewhat less... Well, actually, Gul Dukat was never really one of those people who was overtly frightening, because, let's face it, what's the first episode that we actually saw Gul Dukat show up on DS9 in person?
It's that one where they all get trapped by the old security program.
Gul Dukat gets stuck on this abandoned level of the space station, the same as everybody else. And then we find out just how much of a weasel Gul Dukat can be when he isn't, trying to intimidate people.
And of course, Gul Dukat went through a whole lot of character development as we went through.
Yeah.
I think I still feel like, regardless, the idea that the more familiar that we become with a villain, the less frightening the villain becomes.
Sometimes I think I've seen a couple of instances of it. Very, very good or well-written characters. Like many times you'll see, the plucky, joking companion, or the hot damsel in distress, and a really good writer can just suddenly twist them and turn them into really, really scary villains. Mm-hmm. And you're familiar with them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, I mean, in the case of Gul Dukat, the more we learned about him, like one person said, the more creepy he became. As we found out, there were many, many different ways in which he was not a good person.
Right.
At first, the only thing we knew about him
was desperate to be seen as one.
Yeah. So bringing this even back to one of the missions that Dragoon, you talked about. You were talking about Revo's mission, the one that I as well have played and whatnot. The more that I got to know the villain in that series, the less that I still wanted to defeat him, but the more that I got to know about him, the less that I kind of hated or feared my inevitable confrontations with this guy.
Yeah. I mean, in that case,
I started to feel sorry for him.
The fact that you fight the Pa-Wraith before you fight Jack kind of makes Jack less intimidating.
I started to feel really sorry for the villain and so that's one of those, that's bringing it back around to, let's talk about the Foundry, because that's where you started with this, right, Dragoon? Is that,
I like
bring it back to our mission writing.
Can things become too familiar? And
they absolutely.
I don't want to write a Borg mission ever, because I'm not scared of them. They're way too familiar.
It's possible to write a good Borg mission, but it's difficult. It's more difficult than some of the other ones,
Yeah.
What's funny
Well,
is that
I actually have a mission that includes the Borg as part of the mission, but, it goes way beyond the Borg not being scary. The Borg are kind of like backdrop set dressing to a conflict between you and a third party. Mm-hmm. And the Borg are just there. They provide the backdrop. They provide the setting of the story, but they don't provide the conflict.
Okay.
Well, I mean, the mission in question is the one I did called Treasure Hunt. Not Treasure Hunt with Teton, just Treasure Hunt. In this one, you go to a planet that the Federation has discovered to investigate the nature of mysterious structures that have been detected on the planet. See, here's the thing. The Borg were in the process of exploiting this planet for its resources, and something, happened to make the Borg stop. Maybe it was that thing that Janeway did with that weird computer virus. Maybe it was something else. Who knows? But the Federation knows that there are no active Borg on the planet at this time. So you go there to figure out what the Borg were doing and why they were built on this planet at all when, it was an uninhabited planet or apparently an uninhabited planet before the Borg got there. Why were they interested in it? That's what you're there to discover. You end up fighting a bunch of true-way people who are there for, they're the true way. They want, weapons and stuff.
I feel like it still gets to the I don't think that it's possible to tell a story about the Borg anymore where the Borg scare me.
Well.
That's what I'm trying to do. I've got about a half-finished one that I'm trying to figure out that problem of how to make the Borg scary again.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of the issue.
I'm not sure if I've succeeded yet.
I don't
finally adapt.
Yeah, I don't know that I can possibly find the Borg scary.
That's the problem, is we can never make the Borg.
That doesn't necessarily sound like that particular thing is the point of what Mark's mission is going to be about, right?
No, but I mean, isn't that what we're like?
Well, with I was bringing that one up because it's the far spectrum on the opposite end of the Borg being scary, is that the Borg are not in the story to be in anything even vaguely remotely scary. They're
a MacGuffin, really. They're
the Borg are a MacGuffin in that case.
A thing to advance the plot, but not the focus of it.
Like, step on their technology as you're going around and fighting the Cardassians. I mean, it's like the polar opposite of the Borg being scary.
Yeah.
Well, moving it along, let's see. Skydawn, did you have any particular topic you'd like to bring up?
Actually, I was kind of still on the whole trope thing,
Sure.
but it kind of led into something else, like something that Dragooner brought up, that a lot of people like to create new races or new enemies or anything like that, in the Foundry. To progress their storylines, and I'm kind of linking to John's statement. A lot of people do that because they don't really know how to use what's already been established and what's so ingrained into the canon that it just makes it difficult to write for without it being interesting, or to make it more interesting than what's been already presented in the shows or the books. Or anything like that. I think that's,
Yeah, because the canon races have sort of been done to death in a way.
Right.
How do you write something for Klingons that's new and interesting?
Right. And you also can't do that without possibly upsetting, a lot of
breaking that for hardcore folks.
One of the Stowe storylines with the Klingons, though, investigates who were the Hirk, because the Hirk are a race that exists in canon, if I remember correctly anyways, as a species that once ruled what is now the Klingon Empire, until the Klingons dethroned them and forced them out. Who were they? Where did they go? What happened to them after the Klingons kicked their butt? We don't know.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that you can do, is take things that are not well explained in canon and run wild with it.
Well, the Stowe storylines, though, suggest that the Sekleri enemies that we encounter in some of the Klingon missions are, in fact, the same race as Hirk.
Yeah, a little.
Yeah, I seem to remember something about that. I don't remember a lot of exactly what it was.
Play Gates of Grethor. I
think I remember one that was saying that the Sekleri that we were fighting weren't the real Sekleri. They were something else engineered to be like them or something like that, though that possibly may have been a Foundry mission.
Yeah.
That I'm remembering. I don't know.
It's a good Foundry mission if you get it confused with the official missions.
Yeah.
Me, I'm just afraid that, like, you know, I'll come up with something. I'm like, yeah, it's a great story, and then, like, I'll put it out there, and then I'll realize that there's some like, you know, 10-book Star Trek series that I never read that has, you know, that completely debunks everything that I wrote.
That's okay.
Well,
Still kind of debunks
Yeah,
most of
I
the
can't
books.
worry about that, you know?
Yeah, the
Because
novels
there's so much
are
of it out there.
non-canon for a reason, because they go in a widely varying different directions.
And they tend to be completely wiped out by new canon things anyway.
I mean, I have seen a bunch of them that had really cool stuff in them that continued forward with things that we saw in the TV shows, like the Corps of Engineers books. I like those. But they actually took a bunch of things that we saw on TV and used them in a different setting to write an interesting story.
Yeah.
Like, let's see here. If you watch Star Trek the Animated Series, in the episode The Mad Planet, we saw this a member of this race, insectoid race, called M3 Green. And one of the people on the crew in this book is a member of that race. I think it's called P8 Blue in the book, is that particular character. But also we had Binars as part of a Federation crew in the book, and you got to, see the how the Binars go about their, regular daily lives, which was actually pretty cool.
And that's something that we can do as, it's something that, because I read a lot of the Star Wars tie-in books, and what they were very adept at was taking background characters or background events and fleshing them out. The guy standing third from the left behind Darth Vader in one scene for 30 seconds might have a whole book dedicated to him. And that's something that we can do. We can take, the third High Councilman from the left when Worf gets discommendated, we can take that guy, turn him into a Foundry mission.
Yeah. Well, actually, that reminds me of one of the books, actually, is that you remember the Next Generation episode where Picard finds that Dyson sphere?
Of course.
He sends Riker on an away mission to investigate part of the inside of the Dyson sphere. In the episode, we don't see what happens to Riker on that away mission at all. We see him beam down, and then we see when he gets beamed back up. And when we see him get beamed back up, one of the people on the away team is walking with a limp. One person looks like they've had half their pants burned off. And you're like, what the heck happened to them? And then the episode ends. And
What was the episode with the Dyson sphere?
I don't even remember that
I
personally.
don't remember them transporting down to anything other than the ship.
Yeah, same here.
Well, that's just it, though, is that investigating the buildings on the inside of the Dyson sphere was such a minor, trivial part of the episode that literally all you see is Picard tell Riker to form an away team and beam down. You hear, like, one short status report from Riker about what they're doing on the planet, and then right before Picard leaves the inside of the Dyson sphere, he beams the away team back up. And that's it. Nothing more. And this one book, the entire plot of the book is showing what happened to the away team while they were wandering around the buildings built on the inside of the Dyson sphere for several hours. Unfortunately, I don't remember the name of the book, so...
Yeah. I guess
That's all right.
I guess my response to the topic Skydawn brought up there is that I try to avoid any story that Cryptic is currently working on or is close to working on, or mainly because I don't want to tell a Tholian story because they obviously have Tholian story out there. We're getting new Tholian reputation and other things to go along with it. I might tell a story that is going to be contradicted in,
5 days.
a certain amount of time, in 5 days or something. Yeah. So,
I can tell you that this actually did happen to me.
Yeah, so I err on the side of just staying the heck away from their storyline, which I think is good for me with everything that's
this is kind of
up.
why I flinch a little when the Iconians are brought up.
And that's why when I was thinking about it last week of where I wanted to set my first Romulan missions, so we'll be able to make them, is to take it off on a tangent that's far away from anything that's happening in the Cryptic storyline.
Yeah, I'm going to have to.
So, I've got my own villain, I've got my own plot lines. I think, like I said, I'm going to set it on the Cardassian border, the possibly fictional Cardassian border.
Right.
And, I'm going to have it be all about bringing a star cluster that had some Romulan colonies in it, is bringing that, trying to convince them to come over to your side. It's people that haven't picked a side yet. So,
Cool.
there's going to be that, but, I did have that experience of making a mission and having it be essentially not invalidated, but affected by something that Cryptic made later. Because when the Foundry first started, I made that 5-part Romulan series, which was long before Cryptic made their 5-part Romulan series. And so I sort of, because when I made it first on Triple, and then when Foundry went live on Holodeck, I think that had already been made. The Romulan featured series, Cloaked Intentions, had been released. So when I remade my 5-part series onto Holodeck, because of course you can't transfer it automatically, you have to do it all by hand. So I made many, many changes in that transfer. And so I incorporated. I rewrote a few things. It didn't actually take too much effort to fit it in the timeline. Because some people don't care about the timeline. Some people don't care about Stowe canon.
Right.
But I do. I like to have my missions fit in with the established game world.
Yeah.
So that it's seamless for somebody who's just a player out there.
It's supposed to be part of the content of the game itself, not contradictory to it. As far as
Yeah, that's my view. And not everybody shares that view, and that's cool. No worries.
Yeah. I mean, as a player, I definitely find a blatant canon contradiction to be very pull you out
Jarring?
of it. Yeah.
Unless,
For
of
me, I
course,
think the word would be jarring.
jarring.
Yeah. But it pulls you out. I mean,
Unless, of course, they use that other well-known Star Trek trope, the reset button.
Yeah.
When you go through an entire episode, you hit the reset button at the end, and everything's fine. Everything's like it was. You can totally JJ a planet. You can blow up Earth if you want. Just hit the reset button at the end.
But like the old approach of things are so bad we have to go back in time to fix it.
That's another one.
So here's the thing. That's not just a Star Trek or even just a science fiction trope. I mean, Dallas, way back then,
it was a dream.
It was all a dream.
I mean, that actually is another one that I like to call the worst case scenario. It's that episode like just before the finale of a season that shows you how bad things can get, and then they use some sort of a reset or something else. Like
Stargate did that in their first season.
Yeah.
They said a while back in the Incredible Hulk comic book series that there's this really long story arc where the Hulk goes like completely nuts, and almost off the deep end, and then you find out at the end of the series that it was really all happening inside his head because this villain was telepathically trying to manipulate him, and that none of it was actually real.
Yeah, doesn't It's All a Dream get used a lot in soap operas?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The most famous one, of course, is Newhart.
Newhart, yeah.
Well, of course, the whole show is about him managing this hotel, and he wakes up at the very end. He wakes up with a completely different wife and says, "I had this crazy dream. I was managing a hotel."
He almost want to strangle someone after that.
Yeah, it's a very controversial ending, as I understand. Of course, not really my generation of TV watching, but
Of course, Star Trek has the ultimate Deus Ex Machina in Q.
yeah, you can always have Q show up.
Like in all good things.
Yeah, there was a reset in that one.
Mm-hmm.
It's like
But
wow.
Picard, of course, got to keep his memories and told everybody.
I still like that
Yeah.
episode.
Oh yeah, still a great episode.
That's
Like I said,
You know-
I'm not
a possible future.
I'm not opposed to Deus Ex Machina. Sometimes convenient stuff just happens.
Sometimes it's even very good.
Which, by the way, spoiler for part 2, Q is not going to show up and save you.
Oh, good.
good to know.
So,
Really?
got
good.
part 2 out?
I'm sorry, what?
Do you have part 2 done? Huh?
No, not yet.
Have you released it?
I'm working on it.
You mean in the last?
Every episode.
In the last 30 minutes you haven't finished it? Gosh.
Yeah.
So
It's terrible.
And for the next
Working on
few
this
months, I'll just keep saying, "Oh, it's done. I'm just doing a few polishing touches."
a few thousand.
polishing touches.
That's why from now on, whenever I like the next thing I'm planning on doing is so I don't have to resort to the oh my god I just messed this whole thing up and I need to come up with a reason for why it didn't happen. I'll go into something Star Trek that I don't think Cryptic or anybody else is ever going to go into. Like I was thinking about doing something for like that whole 10-year span at the end of Enterprise, which, I mean, you know, that last episode was kind of like a TNG Foundry mission as far as I was concerned. So...
But they were allowed to use canon characters, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That was like a TNG Foundry mission, but they were allowed to use canon characters. That's absolutely perfect.
Well, the last ending of Enterprise, as a historical reenactment, it was actually, pretty cool.
It would have been cool had it not been the finale.
The thing that
Yeah.
The
Bingo.
thing that threw everybody off on that one was the fact that it was Riker watching a holodeck program and not, just a regular historical reenactment, because it was actually, in many ways, templated as an episode of The Next Generation.
You know what it felt like to me? It felt like, it felt like if only we could make Star Trek Titan.
Yeah.
This would be something.
Troy,
This would be something that
I get a
Riker and
chance
Troy.
later.
And what it almost felt like to me was saying that the entire run of Enterprise had been somebody's holodeck program, which cheapened it a little for me.
Yeah.
Well, no, not really. I mean, because Riker was watching it because he wanted to learn more about the past captains of ships named Enterprise.
Which made no sense in the context.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
It's like, why are you taking time? You have this crisis to deal with. Why are you running a holodeck program?
What I got out of that episode was that, well, the first thing that I knew was it was all part of another episode of TNG, and he wasn't just watching. He was literally in there as the cook talking to the crew about, like, their opinions, and it just sort of, we need more than that.
yeah, that part was weird.
So, do you guys want to hear my rewrite of the Enterprise finale? Since we're on the subject.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Why not?
Okay, first off, you get to keep Riker and Troy since you already had them. Bring in Daniels. Have Daniels recruiting Riker and Troy from the Titan to bring back to Enterprise in order to save a big, massive temporal crisis that pretty much wraps up the whole Cold War, or temporal Cold War.
Have them essentially infiltrating the crew.
Yeah.
Well, that would have been awesome.
That is an interesting idea, yeah, but
I'm with Dawn
Which
here.
is kind of like that.
Daniels are take care of that by wiping out the not cool.
That's a great.
I don't know. They
Because
never.
I thought the wrap up to the Temporal Cold War was taking out the not cool.
Well,
Yeah,
they
it wasn't a
they
wrap
were-
up really. It was more of just that was the last thing they did with it.
It's more of an excuse to kill Silic.
the last rumor was that the whole start of the Temporal Cold War thing, the shadowy guy that was altering the Suliban.
Future guy.
Future guy. Yeah, Future guy was supposed to be Archer, and they were supposed to come up with this whole big story about how Archer eventually ends up in the future trying to change the past and like effectively eliminating himself. It was kind of weird.
That would have been interesting.
Yeah, that would have been totally awesome in my finale.
Of course, one of the things that I did in my latest Foundry mission is I have you encounter Future Guy. And he tells you that, just because you haven't heard about the Cold War, Temporal Cold War, doesn't mean it hasn't been going on. And every event in the past couple hundred years has been a part of it in some way.
Oh, yeah. Well,
That's in my Foundry mission, so of course that's not canon.
Yeah.
But I have to say, though, that it's really
I like
cool
it, though.
concept of, because the idea of the Temporal Cold War is that you have time agents from we don't even know how many different factions trying to undermine each other and maybe possibly eliminate somebody, but they're not really trying all that hard. They're trying to, I guess you could say, jockey for position. And if they can get a strong enough advantage over the others, they might try to make a move, but they're not really committed at the moment. I mean, because that was what happened with the Not Cool. The one Not Cool guy came up with a form of time travel that Daniels couldn't track accurately, and Daniels could only pin down where the guy went by looking at the damage done to the time stream. And that's what led Archer to going into the past and fighting the Not Cool on Earth during World War II.
I think the Temporal Cold War was a fight to prevent the JJ verse.
I don't know.
I think the Temporal Cold War was, to me, actually a very interesting concept.
Yeah.
But not
I liked it too, but
executed all that well. And I think it's something that I want to continue in my Foundry missions. And I've already started to do that with the one that was the contest entry.
definitely think there's fodder there.
Mm-hmm. Well, guys, we're getting towards the 2-hour mark, which is actually the limit of what I can post on SoundCloud. So
Awesome.
we will have to say goodnight for this episode. So
Right.
good night, everybody.
Oh, good night.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you.